We take a look back at how art played a major role in the women's suffrage movement and how these important suffragist stories are being honored today.
Suffragists were instrumental in laying the groundwork for the human rights we have today, many of which go beyond a woman's right to vote.
Women of the past can be models for us today. Their words speak to so many of the events that are happening in the political arena in the United States right now. When we think about art and the suffrage movement, we need to think about two different eras. The era before we have the technologies that enable us to mass produce and mass distribute pictures and photograph and even to record and share music. One of the more important artists for the women's suffrage movement in Ohio was Cornelia Cassidy Davis. Davis was a Cincinnati artist. She was a member of the Cincinnati Women's Suffrage Party. She participated in a competition in 1912 for that year's campaign when Ohio women were widely expected to succeed in getting the vote. Davis created a work that was later reproduced in postcards and posters, Let Ohio Women Vote. It became iconic for the Ohio campaign. It's modeled after the state seal and uses elements of that. One of Davis's competitors in this campaign was Nina Allender. Allender becomes perhaps one of the most influential suffrage cartoonists of the era through her work for the National Woman's Party publication, The Suffragist. If I think of art and the women's suffrage movement, there are three stories about the impact of art that come to mind. The first is from the early 1850s, and it actually has to do with a sculpture by Hiram Powers called The Greek Slave. This sculpture of the Greek slave toured the country, and Lucy Stone, who became a national leader in women's suffrage, saw this sculpture and was moved to spend more of her time focused on women's rights. A second story has to do with theatrical professional Hazel McKay, and she's the mastermind behind many of the pageants that the National Woman's Party produced. In connection with the famous 1913 suffrage parade, McKay created a pageant at the front of the Treasury building called the Allegory. A third story has to do with the portrait monument, which suffragists commissioned and gave to the country in February of 1921. It's a bust of Susan B. Anthony, Lucretia Mott, and Elizabeth Cady Stanton. The thing about the portrait monument is it spent exactly one day in the rotunda and then was relegated to the basement for the next 75 years. And it took an act of Congress to get it restored to the rotunda. Women in history, in general, are overlooked. Women's stories might at most be a footnote in standard history that you might study in school. So it's important that these stories are told.
In 2016, we started a volunteer grassroots effort, and we populated a database with sites of importance to the women's suffrage story.
There are more than 2,020 sites on the online map for the National Votes for Women Trail.
Along the way, the William G. Pomeroy Foundation in Syracuse, New York, recognized the importance of this project and offered to fund over 200 historical roadside markers. So that made our virtual trail into a physical trail. The Sewah Studios has been really terrific to work with, and we're so grateful for their expertise.
Sewah Studios is America's premier cast aluminum historical marker manufacturer, located here in Marietta, Ohio. Sewah Studios was founded in 1927. It was really a man's dream to mark the byways and the highways of America with cast aluminum historical markers. Sewah is really the only known large manufacturer of historical markers in the nation. This is a niche business. We make nothing but historical markers. Sewah's process is really kind of locked in time. There's really four core processes. First, we typeset the patterns, where we individually lay out every letter and then we glue them in place just long enough to make an impression in the sand, which is our next process, which is the sand foundry. This process dates back all the way to the Egyptians. The sand comes from the Ohio River. The Ohio River has a perfect silt and clay mixture for the casting process. We make 2 molds, put them together, and then in the void we transfer the molten aluminum. After the casting is made, we bring it into our finishing department where we work down any of the imperfections or the pouring gates, and we try to clean it up from a metal standpoint to get it ready for the painting process. After that, we take it into our electrostatic powder coating process, puts a very hard, durable finish on it. Next, we then roll on a liquid enamel on all of the letters to get the contrasting view to where you can actually read them, and then we do the beautiful hand-painted seals. The votes for women's trail markers design comes from the William G. Pomeroy Foundation, and they're really kind of a neat combination of a white and the pink, and then some of the more delicate, more feminine looking colors, and we really think it's a nice grouping of colors to go on our marker, and they've been well received nationwide.
Another mission of the National Votes for Women Trail was that we wanted to shine a light on underrepresented women. We're telling the stories that we don't know about, of women of color.
One of those women was Julia Galloway Higgins, a highly influential woman in the Dayton community.
Julia began going to the meetings of the Dayton Women's Suffrage Association. It was a segregated organization. She would be referred to within the minutes as the colored woman, was here today. The colored woman was back again. Well, the colored woman built a booth, and she took it to the Dayton courthouse on Mondays, and she began to give speeches on women's suffrage and the women's right to vote. At that time, she invited women from the WCA, the Women's Christian Association number 2. She invited women from the Dayton Women's Suffrage Association to come and give speeches as well. So what began as a segregated effort, it was through her efforts that it became an integrated effort. And likely because of the amount of racism that was endured and faced during that time, she left that organization. And it was very evident that her work for suffrage never stopped. She was able to do that work through the WCA. And it was later that we found within our family handwritten archives that she organized the Montgomery County Equal Women's Suffrage Association. Would the Dayton community be different had there been no Julia Higgins? Absolutely it would be. Voters' rights, the support of women's rights, the support of women's right to choose, all of these were things that Julia worked with and towards within her lifetime. And here we are again. So we pass torches. They are not extinguished. What was done generations ago is relevant today. Learn from it, augment it for today's world and society, and keep up the fight.